Welcome back to Impact Now. Today, I'm really excited to share a conversation with Marilia Bezerra, Chief Program Officer of the IKEA Foundation. I've known Marilia for a long time, and she's actually been part of the journey as the GIIN went from launch all the way through to where we are today. And I'm really excited about this conversation because a couple of the big themes that you'll hear throughout the discussion are how the IKEA Foundation is thinking about driving change on many themes, but all anchored in on how to improve livelihoods for people as they think about how to create a healthier future for the planet. Impact investing is integral to this new strategy, and you'll hear a lot of her thinking about how to think about the role of impact investing in the context of bigger systems, how to think about partnering with philanthropists, development finance institutions, the unique role that philanthropy can play in this broader ecosystem. And we've finished with a view towards how we can have hope and inspiration in a very challenging time. All right. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and let's dive in. Marilia, it's so great to see you again, and welcome to Impact Now. I know this is an exciting time for the IKEA Foundation. You're rolling out a new strategy, and the foundation's always been centered on climate, energy access, improving livelihoods, and partnerships, and using capital, effectively to help support partners has always been fundamental to the way you work. I'd love to hear about the new strategy and how you think about building partnerships to reach your goals.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation to be here, Amit. It's such a joy to be with you again and in this format. So the IKEA Foundation is just coming out of the gate with at the tail end of a strategic review, and we are doubling down in our commitments to climate and people, but with a heightened focus. Um, and maybe I can talk about, to contextualize our work, a little bit about some of the big shifts that we're making. We're making many shifts about both on what we focus on, but also on how we work. And the first big shift is an integration of these two very important areas, which in the past we have been organized with two pillars. One, people, where we focus on economic development, livelihoods, income generation, enterprise development, and so on. And then on the other side, we focused on climate. And we're integrating these two. And we're integrating these two because we really understand that where climate action has failed, it has failed because it failed to capture people, to meet the needs and the aspirations of people. And now we are living through these massive backlash. And we are living with the reality that we are overshooting our 1.5 degrees and that we're not on track to meet our commitments to the Paris Agreement, and our commitments to future generations. So we really want to be successful in creating powerful development pathways that are future oriented and planet positive. So we're integrating these two things, and now everything we do has to be both. Another big shift that we are making is that there's very little funding going to climate efforts today from the philanthropic sector, actually around 2% to 3%, depending on who you ask, right? And even a smaller proportion of this is actually going to emerging economies. So we are shifting our focus almost completely to invest in and fund work to help create development pathways for emerging economies that are people-centric and they are climate positive. So that is actually quite a significant shift for us as well. A third shift, and this is on the how. We understand that we want to create change that is lasting, and change that is lasting really requires structural transformation. So we are adopting something we call the systems lens to our grant making and our investment. And really what that means is that we are looking at challenges and opportunities in place and looking at the interdependencies and how they connect, and looking at the ecosystems or the players that are operating in these solutions or in these interventions, and looking at them as a collective, because the truth is that issues like climate and poverty and social inclusion are too big for any single player to tackle alone. So we are imagining ourselves as the funder that is really thinking about whole ecosystems and moving away from a focus of a grant by grant or investment by investment approach, and really thinking more collectively and holding the space for our partner community, for local stakeholders to be coming together to understand each other as a part of a whole system so they can act more effectively, so they can work on these underlying forces that keep a system locked in, as they are. And then a fourth big shift for us, and this is a really powerful commitment, I think, for us to make, which is a commitment to localization. And localization doesn't mean just we fund local actors, but it really means that we are orienting our funding and our investment to really help shift decision making, shift power, and to design the solutions, guided by, driven by those who have proximity to the issues, right? So if we're talking about you know, distributed renewable energy systems in India, it will be the people in India who are going to be most prepared to deliver a long-lasting solution. So that commitment, together with the systems lens and that focus on emerging economies and the integration of our two pillars, they kind of shape the contours. There's much more, but they shape the contours of where we are headed and how we are looking at partnerships. We are looking at partners who are curious, like us, to understand these integrated opportunities and threats to our transitions. And we are looking to be humble learners and to be sensing where change is happening and tracking where change is happening so we can nurture that with our funding.
It's really exciting, and congratulations on the new strategy. I know you've been working on it for some time, but it's what a couple things I really appreciate about it. One, the fact that it's really centered on kind of human impact and communities. And as you're thinking about these big systems, at the end of the day, I know what you've been really focused on is how do we actually improve livelihoods. And I think that's a very powerful anchor as you think about the new work. And also this approach of systems. Yeah, we have a lot of interest from the impact investing community, and look at these kind of, interdependencies. It could also be like value chains, for example, in agriculture, of what are all the things that need to kind of fall into place for, regenerative agriculture to land healthy, nutritious food on people's tables around the world. And I think you're thinking that systems view, I think, is a really exciting way to think about your work going forward. Speaking of systems, one of the things that you and I have always talked about is like, how do you actually drive you kind of more structural change or systems change? And one of the things I've always struggled with is both an appreciation that this takes time and patience, but also a sense of urgency around how do we actually make action and progress quickly. How do you think about reconciling that kind of time horizon issue, and how do you think about understanding whether or not you're moving the needle on systems?
Yeah, that's such an important question. So I'm Brazilian. In Brazil, we have an expression of sometimes you have to whistle and chew gum at the same time. And I think that this is a case of we have to whistle and chew gum at the same time. There are some very ready to go solutions that are proven, that are in place, and we can support those and the frontline responses, and they offer tangible benefits, and they are here today, right? There's no scarcity of that, and we do need to get those early wins, and we do need to work with tangible results. And at the same time, uh, the kind of lasting change that we're looking to create does require that structural shift in markets, in policies, in behaviors, in power dynamics. So that change, you can try. We have tried. Everybody has tried. We've been trying for 20 years now. It cannot be rushed. We have to invest in the long-term transformation of these systems, and we have to invest in creating the conditions that will shape the future outcomes that we want to see, right? So we need to support policy reform. Like without an enabling policy environment, no enterprise is going to thrive, right? No market is going to be developed. So these things do take time and we cannot ignore it. We need to think about shifting incentives, financial or otherwise. We need to be strengthening local institutions, enabling movements, enabling narratives that are positively creating kind of a vision of the future we all want to inhabit, right? So these are not separate tracks, actually. They have to go together, and we have to do both. And on the question about how do we know if it's working, how do we measure that? Like, is a question that we get a lot, right? Um, Traditional metrics are important. Like if you can count the emissions that got reduced or the number of people who got jobs, that's great, and that is a part of a story, right? But that part is limited. If you're asking a part to tell the story of the whole, you're gonna get very disappointed. So these traditional metrics, they can and should be included on understanding progress, but beyond that, we have to understand, our policies and markets and the norms that shape policies and markets moving in the right direction. And you have to be sensing that, even if the outcomes are not here yet, or our institutions, our coalitions, and local actors better able to respond, adapt, and lead these transformations, right? Our effective communities gaining
Mhm.
greater voice and greater power. And are all these changes being embedded in the narratives, the rules, the norms, the financing flows, and so they can be self-reinforcing. Um, and that is you're not going to get to with a number, but you are going to have conversation. You have to have many ways to understand change beyond data points. And then the next thing I would say too is that we have to move away from seeking to have an exact attribution of an impact to
Mhm.
a grant or an investment, because, as I said before, system change is collective work. It's going to take a lot of organizations, enterprises, investors coming together to tackle one single issue. So we need to think more along the terms of contribution, like how are we contributing to shifting an energy transition in a particular country, or creating more prosperous ways of being in relationship with the land, and non-extractive ways of being in relationship with the land. So we have to do that. And I think the whole MEL sector, monitoring, evaluation, and learning sector is actually lit on fire with really incredible people thinking about how to do that, because we do have a responsibility to know if we're doing things right. Right? We have no time to waste. We have no funding to waste. So there's a lot that we are learning in that journey. And I would say the last thing is that it is not just about tracking the change that is happening, but it's about tracking how change is happening. So we know that change that happens actually gets to stick for the long time, for the long term.
Thanks for sharing your views on how you are actually thinking about this balance of speed, but also patience, and the long view on driving, structural change. One of the things that we've been speaking about, we've known each other for a long time, and more recently, we've been connecting as you've been exploring how to engage with impact investing. And I'd love to hear how you're thinking about impact investing fitting into the new strategy, and also how are you thinking about the role of philanthropy or catalytic impact investments in unlocking greater pools of capital from other sources.
So when I joined the IKEA Foundation, I found out that charitable foundations in the Netherlands were actually not allowed to do impact investment. And to our luck and effort from our team here, who was working with the Dutch government together with other philanthropies, that shifted. So since 2024, charitable foundations in the Netherlands can do impact investment. And so we've been building our muscle and getting ready to deploy our first investment capital this year. So we're very, very excited about that. And how we're thinking it is with the deep commitment and primacy for impact. that is actually regulated by this new legislation here in the Netherlands, that any charitable foundation has to do something called a public benefit
Mhm.
investment. So we are not allowed to see commercial level returns by law. Even if we were, um, our choice would have been to be using our very scarce and flexible capital in a way that would be most enabling and most risk taking to help drive more private capital flows to some of these emerging economies in which we're going to work. So, impact first capital, um, capital that is patient, that is able to take risks, that is able to kind of wedge new spaces for other investors to come and follow on is our strategy. A second choice we've made is that we have one strategy, right? Our teams, our grant making teams, and our investment teams are going to sit together under the same roof, and are going to deliver the same impact outcomes that we're seeking to achieve with our new strategy. So, whatever outcome we're seeking in Brazil with grants, is going to be the same outcome we're seeking in Brazil with impact investment. So the question is, what type of capital is
Mhm.
going to be most successful in unlocking some of these solutions? For some things, if we say policy shifting, it is not going to be done with impact investment. But if we're talking about scaling, the standing forest economy in Brazil, then it might be. So we are designing still, actually restructuring our teams internally. But the goal here is that we have one strategy with two types of capital that we can deploy, and that we're going to try and learn from other foundations who have also embarked in this impact investment, and see, I'm sure that over the next couple of years, there's a lot for us to learn. So maybe I'll be coming back to you and to your members and checking in and asking questions.
Well, I mean, that's why we're a network. Of course, it's connecting people to advance collective learning, and of course, to help us all be more effective at solving problems around the world. But it's exciting to hear about these developments. And one of the things that I'm also interested in hearing about is you've been thinking a lot about the specific ways in which IKEA Foundation's philanthropic capital and investment capital can really meet the moment. And you and I have spoken a lot about the financing gap when it comes to sustainable development, and the urgency around closing that gap. Given what you're seeing in the world right now, what would you like to see philanthropists, investors doing differently?
For a sector that has very little to lose if you compare it to government or private sector, right? In government, you have incredible electoral pressures. Private sector is always under, the tremendous rules of competition. And we sit in philanthropy with one job to do, which is to create impact in the world. So our job is to focus on impact. And it is because our we have more space, because we have more freedom, it is our job is to take risks, and to show the way, and to be the first one stepping into new markets, or markets that are perceived to be too risky. Half the time is just perception, anyways. So, and then showing and proving that there's viability, that there's growth possible, that there's talent in place. So, I really think that we as a sector can do more, can take more risks, and can be even more catalytic than we are today.
So, really, one of the things that you and I have spoken about is like, how do we actually drive progress in those markets that are less developed? And one of the big sources of capital from an investment standpoint are development finance institutions. Of course, they have a tremendous legacy of making investments in emerging markets, but we also see the landscape shifting with more private investment, more philanthropy coming online. What would you like to see from development finance institutions going forward?
Well, first, I think lots of foundations like ours are really eager to collaborate with development finance institutions, because we do know that our capital, it's quite small compared to what's available to them, and even both philanthropy and DFIs together still have, we're dealing with a billions to trillions gap here. But I do wish and hope that we could shift towards taking more risk together, right? I still think that philanthropy has more flexibility, and we can be at the bottom of every stack. But I still would love to see the development finance institutions taking a leadership role in taking a bit more risk. I understand the pressures, and I understand that, we have so many incredible colleagues leading the ways within those institutions. But I do think collectively the development sector, um, in the context we are today, with the scarcity of financing that we have, is going to have to grow in patience, in risk appetite, and in flexibility. So I hope that we can all work together on that challenge.
Well, I think that really resonates, both with your investment strategy and your philanthropic strategy. What I'm hearing you say is really the role in helping to take risks and extend the reach of markets to populations, to problems, to geographies where that have not benefited from the sustainable models that we have in other parts of the world. And I think that certainly strikes us as a critical gap at this moment in the world as we see government cutbacks and other types of resources becoming more scarce that had a greater risk tolerance historically. So it's great to see foundations like IKEA Foundation stepping up to help fill that role. And I hope we can partner with other foundations and wealthy individuals who want to really play a role in helping to extend the reach of impact investing to communities that desperately need its benefits. When you think about, examples that are motivating for you, I mean, obviously you've been doing a lot of work at getting kind of, closer to communities and shifting power and think about this localization strategy. Can you share an example of a grant or investment that really, was inspiring for you and you think might be, help motivate your thinking as you embark on this new strategy?
Oof. Now that's a hard question. There are so many. Um, I think where I would start is just in talking about how we engage local communities in designing these solutions, right? I think the first thing to think about, if this were a business podcast and you're talking about business development, you would never develop a business without the end user being at the center. Never would you design a product or a service without being, testing and working with the consumers to make sure that it meets a need, right? And yet, in philanthropy and impact investment, we sit in our high towers and we think we have the solutions, and we dictate a lot, right? So the more that we have worked with our partners, and our partners who are in the field, they're working with their end users, with the communities that we are looking to support. Um, the more effective are the outcomes. So I can think of one. The Danish Refugee Council has created a loan facility for SMEs in a part of Uganda, in northern Uganda, that is really facing some of the most extreme impacts of climate change. And it's an area that has been obviously, not maybe not obviously, but has been consistently labeled as too risky. And in part, that risk sits on the fact that no one could really build a pipeline there. And, and DRC itself, the Danish Refugee Council, could not build that pipeline, but for the fact that their team, the people that work in their team in Uganda, are from these communities. And they are the members of the communities. And they had a huge advantage in spotting businesses with solid business models that would be completely invisible perhaps to you or me. Certainly, there's no data on the internet available for that. So these guys worked with the communities to develop a product that would meet the demands of these small and medium enterprises, that would be including consumers, that would be creating the right kinds of jobs, and they found an incredible amount of success. A completely different type of partner that I could also mention is our partnership with the Clean Cooling Collaborative, which is essentially a coalition that is working on taking a systems approach to catalyze change in the cooling sector. And, the cooling sector, it kind of hits many things at the same time. If you are being more efficient, you're using less energy, you are reducing emissions, but it also is helping people live well with the climate change that we're all experiencing. And they've been working on global policies. They've gotten 72 countries to focus on cooling as a national priority. They managed to unlock 700 million in new investments through the World Bank to a program called Ahead in India, that's providing blended finance to scale affordable and efficient cooling. They've engaged with grassroots community-led initiatives across India to reduce heat exposure in informal settlements. And then the last but not least, they've been testing technology. So they're showing that there's this technology that is 5 times more efficient in air conditioner technology that is 5 times more efficient in India, and that is ready for scale, right? So it reduces energy use by about 60%. So um, there are such incredible there's such incredible work out there, and it is such a privilege to be a funder, um, because we are in this position, as I said, to be humble learners and to be tracking what already exists, and to help those hold space, finance, and support these initiatives that are really transforming our world in the right direction.
Well, and those are great examples because I think you both talk about the need to create enabling conditions that allow kind of big changes to happen all around the world, but also the example of building bottoms up business, local small and medium sized enterprises that create jobs, improve livelihoods, and of course meet needs for local communities. This has been a great conversation, and I want to just close by looking ahead and asking you to kind of project forward what you think will happen in the future, which I realize is especially challenging now because it's hard to know what will happen in the world next week or next month. But if we looked, 5 to 10 years out, and you think about the role of large foundations, what would you like to see them doing when it comes to the areas that matter most to you? Like energy systems, food systems, improving livelihoods. How would you like to see philanthropy playing a role as we look to the horizon? And where do you see the need to have kind of greater action and leadership as we think about how to create lasting impact?
I First, the moment is a really challenging one, and I want to start by acknowledging that there is real human suffering, and real challenges to people all around the world. Um, so I don't want my hope to erase that. But I do want to say that systems don't change when they are very solid. They change when they are fragmenting, when they are falling apart. So, with this moment where we see a lot of pain, a lot of challenge, there's also an opportunity for us to shape change. Change is happening. No matter what we do or we don't do, change is happening. So, my question is, how can we become really good shapers of change? And for philanthropies, what I think that might mean or call for is that we become better learners and better followers or trackers of where good change is emerging in the world. That we approach the emergence of solutions with humility, and that we become true enablers of positive change that is really truly emerging everywhere we look, and that we don't let all the challenging, heartbreaking things that are happening really move our focus away from the fact that we can and have the opportunity today to create systems that are a lot more generative, a lot more people centered, a lot more inclusive, a lot more just, a lot more loving than we've had in the past. And our job um, is to track, sense, be together, connect, and shape change in the direction we want to see it happen.
Well, thank you so much for those final thoughts. I mean, I think what I'm really hearing from you is, that we are in this great moment of disruption. And while it's incredibly challenging, and we need to be kind of cognizant of the human toll it's taking on all of us, it does create a window of opening for us to think about shaping a better future. And that's certainly as far as a lot of the work that we do at the Global Impact Investing Network, and it's certainly something that I can appreciate about your new strategy, as really stepping up to meet this moment and driving impact in local communities. So, Marilia, thank you so much for joining us on Impact Now.
It was a pleasure, Amit.